One last announcement that I want to make about the WCLA MCLEs before I turn it over to our young lawyers, and this is going to be the very first program that WCLA is going to record and then offer to the membership to view in the recorded version at some later date and actually get credit for doing it that way. So it's very interesting that we're talking about the internet today and tweets and things like that. In fact, this is going to be the first recorded program. I think we're going to put it on some type of YouTube channel or some type of Facebook channel, if that means anything to anybody out there. You'll get some specific instructions from WCLA about how to do that if you want to do it. So the way we're going to do it is we're going to have these programs recorded and be available for viewing for credit the month after they are presented live. So in this case, it's going to be available for viewing for credit from November 1 until the end of November. There's going to be a specific set of instructions about how you log on to that channel and how you make your presence known and how you request a certificate of attendance, how you can email with the presenter with questions that you might have. So all of those instructions are going to be coming later, but I wanted everybody to know that this program will be up and running in the recorded version by November 1, and you'll have until the end of the month to view it for credit if you want to do that. Of course, you can't view it again and get double credit if you're here personally, but I'm telling you that so that you can spread the word to your colleagues that that's going to be available. So any questions or comments about that? By the way, if you do have comments about how maybe better to serve our membership who wants to watch these things in the recorded version, please on the suggestions box of the evaluation sheet, please put your suggestions about how we can do that. You younger lawyers know way more than us older lawyers about how it's convenient to do that type of thing, so please let us know your suggestions. So at this point, I'd like to introduce Tommy Gale, who has stepped up and done a great job for the young lawyers section and kind of put this program together, and I'll let him do the introductions. Thanks, Tommy.
Good afternoon. Rachel and Jane have actually put together this particular lecture, and I wanted to thank them. Rachel Sinnen from Elfbaum, Evers, and Amarillo, and Jane Ryan from Rosario, Sabella. They're here to do a great job and help us learn about the evidence issues involved. Also wanted to, again, point out this bowling tournament, October 26th. It's going to be a good time. A couple of games of bowling are guaranteed in the first round. Food, drinks, it'll be a good time. Without further ado, good luck.
So can everybody hear me? I've never been told that I'm too quiet. Everybody in the back can hear me? All right, great. So once again, my name is Rachel Sinnen. I'm a petitioner's attorney from Elfbaum, Evers, and Amarillo, and here with Jane Ryan, respondent's attorney from Rosario, Sabella. Now, in July of 2017, Judge Egan did one of the lunchtime seminars on social media. Now, that lunchtime seminar reviewed more on the rules of professional conduct, online reviews, marketing with attorneys. So today we're going to focus more on social media and how that relates to workers' compensation, how it is being used, how it can be used at trial, some of the evidentiary logistics, as well as how we can handle social media with our clients, both for petitioners, attorneys, and respondents. So let's go ahead and talk about some of the social media sites that are being used today. Now, it's not just about Facebook. And it's really important to get to know some of the terms and logistics about how these different media sites operate. I know for a lot of people you may not be using social media and you don't really understand what's the point of getting to know it, but it is important. And it's also important for those of you who do understand some of these terms not to assume that everybody does. If you're at trial, you really need to make sure that when you're establishing the record, it's important to explain what some of these terms are. Now, in most of our lecture today, we're going to be talking a lot about Facebook. Our examples are going to be talking about Facebook, but we're going to go through some of the other sites that should be on your radar. Now, with Facebook, you're posting original content on what's called your wall, or what Facebook calls your timeline. Original content can be anything from a statement to a video to a photograph. These things can be put onto your profile, your wall, and then those things can be linked to other social media accounts. So you can post from your Twitter that can appear on your Facebook. Your Instagram can put on your Facebook. You can also check into locations, and keep in mind, I could check in almost anywhere right now if I wanted to. It's not really limited to where my cell phone says I'm located close by. Now, your network of whether those be businesses, friends, co-workers, those are considered your friends, the people that are in your network. And when you add them to your network, it's considered following those individuals. And once you do that, you can constantly get updates on those individuals and what they're posting on what's called your news feed. That's the thing that pops up when you open either your app on your smartphone or you're going online. Those updates are what's called your news feed. And Facebook actually uses a lot of algorithms to prioritize what is going up on that news feed. Interestingly enough, when you stop scrolling, and even if you don't click on something, you just take a look at it, Facebook knows. And so they'll actually take a look at what kind of content, either articles that you're opening up, or what kind of posts from your friends that you seem to be interested enough to stop. And that's what they determine as what should go in the order of your news feed and what should not. You can also tag other friends, meaning if you are posting something and you want to do a shout out or what we call tagging to a friend, you can do that. Depending on those privacy settings that you search, and we'll talk more about that later, that post on your Facebook wall can appear on theirs. Some other things that you can do, send direct messages, that's via Facebook Messenger. You can also create private and public events, send invitations, send out information regarding that event. And they actually recently opened up what they call Marketplace, that is for buying and selling items. Now, Facebook is actually turning into a bit of an old hat. Mid-20s and going forward are primarily using Facebook. From your early 30s, younger, starting to use a lot more of Snapchat and Instagram. Snapchat has given you the ability to take either a photo or a short video, send it either to a public network or to an individual friend. After that photo is or video is viewed, it's gone. It cannot be seen again. Twitter, it's actually currently at 140 characters. They're soon to be expanding that to 280. Similar to Facebook, you have that ability to tag people using that @ sign and using the handle that they have created for that profile. Instagram, owned by Facebook, limited to videos, photos. You can create comments on that and follow friends, similar to that news feed that you're going to have streaming. Now, there are some other websites that you may remember and you feel like they're long gone, but they are still alive. MySpace was really popular around 2006 to 2009. At that time, Facebook was limited to very particular universities, so other people were using MySpace. It operated the same. It's currently being used more for a music platform. If you had a MySpace page, I promise you it's still up there. You might want to take a look at that and see if it's still public, because they did not delete that content. Foursquare was used. They kind of relaunched a companion app called Swarm. It allows people to check into various locations. You can write reviews similar to Yelp. Take a look at where your other friends are, communicate that you're at a location, things like that. Also relevant, and I think something that when you're taking a look at social media and how that can relate to workers' compensation, it's important to look at LinkedIn. LinkedIn is more for professional networking. A profile is going to read similar to a resume. How many people here have a LinkedIn account? I'm surprised it's not more. You should get on LinkedIn. A lot of employers there can post for job openings, and it's just used primarily more for employment purposes. Now, I put Google Plus up here because it is Google, and they've constantly been reinventing what they want Google Plus to use. They wanted it to be a competitor for Facebook. I think it's failed in that respect. It's currently being used more for photography enthusiasts that like to post various photographs, but I would keep it on your radar as it continues to relaunch and reinvent itself and see how they try to compete with some of the bigger social media giants. Another website that's being used with, I'd say, the mid-20s and younger is Tumblr. Instead of a wall, they have what they call a dashboard. They're microblogging, which are just short multimedia blogs. And again, you can follow friends and share content that way. Now, let me actually ask Jane here, when you're investigating a case or looking into a petitioner, what kind of social media sites are you using, and what kind of experience are you having so far?
So Facebook is the biggest source of information from a respondent's perspective, and I'll get into why in a few minutes. But 9 times out of 10, when a client refers me a file, it includes a social media report, where an investigative company, the same company that we would use to get surveillance or look into prior claims or prior auto accidents, is looking at all these different mediums that Rachel just talked about and saying, this petitioner has an account on XYZ site, and we're going to use that as a jumping off point later to go back and try to get more detailed information about what the person's posting, where they're checking in, who they're with, and things like that. And I mention that not just because those reports don't just mention the petitioner using those sites, but also known associates. So we look for significant others, mom, dad, things like that, and we'll get into why that's relevant later as well, because they could be including the petitioner in certain posts and certain photographs that could be relevant for impeaching their credibility. So what I want to talk about now is, why do we care whether a petitioner has social media presence out in the World Wide Web? The first issue is from a vocational rehab standpoint. This Meyer case is mentioned in the materials, and basically the vocational counselor took a look at the petitioner's social media presence and said, well, this person has computer skills. You know, they may say, I don't know how to type 100 words per minute, I don't know how to use Word or Excel or something like that, but if they have the ability to maintain a Facebook account, post things to Facebook, and be sufficiently typing and making posts, that is a skill that can be considered in a vocational profile. The other issue is temporary total disability. In this particular case, the court looked at the fact that the petitioner had an online presence buying and selling things on eBay and making, assumingly making a profit off of those sales. And the question is whether or not that's considered income for purposes of them not being able to receive TTD. Now, from the respondent's standpoint, I would love to use that as a basis to cut off TTD, but in reality, we know from the Sunny Hill case that a petitioner can earn kind of a sporadic or ancillary income and still be entitled to either total permanent benefits or TTD benefits. But it is something to consider, and again, the buying and selling could also be considered from a vocational standpoint too. Just a few things I wanted to mention as well. On someone's, at least Facebook profile, you can also list past jobs. So that's another relevant piece of information that a vocational counselor could look at and say, wait, you didn't tell me you were able to do XYZ job. That's going to be relevant to what you're able to do now. I recently had a case where we were watching someone's social media, Facebook again, and he listed, so excited to start my new job at so-and-so trucking company while he's on TTD. Okay, so then that leads me to then subpoena that new employer that he just happened to put in his timeline, in his profile, and we were able to successfully cut off TTD and show that the guy was a liar. Also, just other pictures that are posted as far as hobbies, skills, hobbies, things that maybe the petitioner doesn't think is particularly relevant, could be relevant to a vocational counselor. So all of that information could be relevant to the individual's vocational profile.
And some of the things to add as well, when we're taking a look at some of these cases, because social media is relatively a new concept and just starting to appear in some of these trials and decisions, keep in mind that with these cases, there's multiple issues going on, whether it's just about credibility. Some of them are your classic IME versus treater on causation. So when I pointed out some of these cases specifically because I wanted you guys to see how other how social media can be used in some different ways. A lot of cases are out there focusing on social media, very similar to surveillance footage or photographs. Some of the cases we pointed out here today with getting discharged for violating a sick day policy or the use of a vocational rehab, even though that might not have been the center of the case, it's a really interesting look at to what some of the consequences can be for social media and how it can be argued. If we could just go back real quick to the vocational rehab, I think one of the things to really keep in mind with social media, especially if you're not very familiar with some of the nuances with it, is don't assume anything. I wondered here, and kind of my discussion point is, how can we assume that someone's using social media on a computer desktop? A lot of us use them on our smartphones, on tablets. How could those skills then be transferable? So don't always assume that someone, just because they have an active social media account, are using it on a computer. It's very possible that it's not being done. Facebook and Twitter used to indicate on their posts if something was being used with a mobile device. They no longer do that. The other thing to keep in mind is, I think, with whether or not some petitioners are capable of speaking English or not. All these social media platforms, you can change your language settings. They can be used in Spanish. Although I think it would be to a good point, you've probably done, we're seeing whether or not people are using posts in different languages such as English and how that's going to affect vocational rehab.
Sure, and again, relevant for a vocational counselor. If the individual is presenting to a voc counselor saying that they have a first grade education in Mexico and can't speak English, obviously that's going to limit their ability to find a job. If they're posting all over Facebook in English, then, we've just caught them in a lie. Again.
So moving on to credibility. Sense of being here. So moving on to credibility, very minor note in this Dundee case, but I thought it was interesting that they pointed out that she ended up getting terminated for violating a sick day policy. Another case here, Christian Ortiz was actually my case in front of Thompson Smith, and I think it's your classic frustrating dilemma where a petitioner starts arguing about something that's not even relevant, and it just goes downhill from there. In this case, we were only seeking the TT benefits through August of 2013, and he testified that he eventually did not return to work until May of 2014. From my standpoint, irrelevant. I wasn't claiming TTD for that period. However, on cross-examination, multiple contradictions with various posts saying things about can't wait for my third shift and checking in at Sony, and I think also like Walmart, and there was just various check-ins about working different jobs prior to that May 2014 date. Again, was it relevant to TTD? No. It ended up being a big deal for credibility. And I think the question, and we'll kind of turn to it in a little bit, is how does social media, how similar is it to surveillance footage? But before that, I think, Jane, you had some other examples on credibility.
So from a respondent's perspective, the main benefit I can see from taking a look at tracking someone's social media is the issue of credibility. Can I catch this individual doing something that is inconsistent with what they say they can do or what they're telling their doctors they can't do? So some of my personal horror stories, skydiving photos with a shoulder injury, bowling photos, holding up the bowling ball with the affected elbow and wrist. You know that nobody who does CrossFit can go into a CrossFit gym and not check in, right? It's just like impossible. So if you see somebody consistently checking into a gym, CrossFit facility, use that as a trigger to potentially subpoena those facilities. We'll get into some foundational issues in a bit, but I use social media not so much as here is the specific post of you skydiving, it's as a trigger to tell me, hey, I should be getting some surveillance on this person. They're doing things that's inconsistent with what they're telling their doctors they can do, so where can I subpoena to try and get more concrete evidence that would be easier to get in from a foundational standpoint and less expensive if I only have to send a $25 check to the CrossFit gym as opposed to trying to get a data collection company to preserve that evidence from the individual's Facebook page. Another point is vacation photos and vacation check-ins. A friend from Quinteros just sent me a recent commission decision where the arbitrator took into account the fact that this individual said she was totally and permanently disabled, but had posted pictures on her Facebook of her dancing on the bar in Mexico. So those things are relevant. Are check-ins in another country relevant? And we'll get into a minute on how you can check in pretty much anywhere in the world and you might not be there, but if that's correlating to pictures of you with a tequila shot in your hand, then chances are you're in Mexico dancing on the bar. So we'll get into issues of how, as petitioners, you guys need to kind of warn your clients against those things. But if I'm an arbitrator and somebody's presenting one way in front of me and then I'm seeing these photos, that's going to be something that's highly relevant to me. And as respondents attorneys, it can be a huge tool. And even if we can't get some of these things in from a foundational standpoint, use it to put doubt in the mind of your opponent. I've had several times where, a photo comes across my desk, maybe it's from a coworker or from the insured directly, but I don't have the proper foundation to put this into evidence. But if I give it to Rachel as my opponent and I say, hey, your client's skydiving, it's going to put doubt in her mind as to the veracity of the complaints that are being made, and that can be a settlement tool and just a way for us to try and move the case towards resolution.
So I think going on to the next slide here, I pose a question to our audience. How is a social media video or photos, how is it being used any different than surveillance? Or, can you want to go to the next one? And so I kind of tip off here to a couple of things that I think would be different and relevant, but any examples here of social media being used versus a surveillance footage? Any questions or ideas as to how that might be different? No one?
Values.
It's a tough crowd today. So when we're looking at that, the classic example of being anything catching the petitioner in activities outside medical restrictions or complaints of pain. However, you want to really be taking a look at that. Don't assume anything. Petitioner's attorney, just because the video was posted on a particular day does not mean that was actually when the video was taken. You're going to want to confirm that with your client. I think taking a look at the medical records to look at that time frame. Was your client doing relatively well on pain medication? Maybe injections were actually providing some relief. Don't forget about physical therapy records. I think sometimes we overlook those and we don't really examine those, but those are great areas where we can take a look and see how they were progressing, and maybe that's a way to kind of explain why some of those activities aren't really outside of the norm. I think another good question is whether or not a video or photo is really being used not so much on a causation or credibility for causation standpoint, but whether or not it's really being used more for credibility, if it's showing drug use, illegal activity, even some questionable activity. And that's really going to be important on some relevance objections as to whether or not that's going to be fair game. And where's the line? I think that's what we're going to be finding out. I think the biggest point is if someone is trying to introduce an entire, let's say 25 pages of posts, some of those might be relevant, but what stops your arbitrator from looking through a whole 25 pages of posts? And some of those might be some controversial issues, or talking about trafficking, or maybe having some political opinions that you might not want your client or the arbitrator to be taking a look at. So how do you handle that? Do you physically redact those things? Do you object and have the arbitrator only admit the posts that are being cross-examined on? So make sure you're going through those. There's going to be a lot of things that you just don't want the arbitrator to see.
And from a respondent standpoint on that, I would argue that the comments are relevant for purposes of the post to look at the context. Because if you have a petitioner that's denying that they either made the post or were in the photograph or when the photograph was taken, the comments could be relevant to provide insight on that. And just to go back to your other point, Rachel, if I'm seeing posts about some type of illegal activity, it's just going to prompt me to look at their criminal background. Most of that stuff is online. Most counties, you can search it by name or social security number or date of birth, see if they have a criminal record. Maybe it's a felony conviction or something that you can use to attack their credibility, or the investigation companies can do an official background check as well.
Now, the next two cases that we're going to talk about, I think, just show how understanding social media, understanding how it works, can really save you a huge headache. In Anna Ash here, we have a petitioner who owns horses, and she's posting on her Facebook things like, getting ready to ride JD today. Now, of course, a lot of people assume that meant she was going to ride the horse. She testified that no, her husband was the one that rides horses. Now, I don't know about many of you, I use the word we a lot when I mean you. I'll tell my assistant, let's call petitioner today and set up that appointment. I didn't mean we, I meant she was going to do it. It's just a matter of speed. We're writing on social media how we talk versus we're not going to, just because we're writing, it's not going to be the way you would write in, let's say, a brief or in a proposed decision. So keep that in mind. In this case, she talked about, we'll go on to the next page with how we write that perfect. She talked about, we picked up 86 barrels of hay, or 86 bales of hay, and there were multiple witnesses. Can you imagine the continuances and the days that it had to take to try this portion about the fact that she just went with her husband and sons and she was in the truck and they picked up the hay. But she said, we went to go do it. I just think this is a beautiful example of the time and energy that had to go into this just small, I would consider it a small issue, but it ended up being a big one. Going on to the next one. With Joseph Northington, Dr. Butler, as respondent's IME examiner, wrote an addendum report. He reviewed surveillance footage as well as a Facebook page that was indicating that petitioner went fishing. In fact, the post came from petitioner's son-in-law saying, went fishing with my father-in-law, something to that effect. Turned out he had two father-in-laws and was referring to the other father-in-law. Multiple witnesses had to come in just regarding which father-in-law we were talking about. I just think that's such a waste of time and energy on this issue. And at the end of the day, the arbitrator didn't find it relevant because they weren't talking about the petitioner.
Well, and this is an example where had this gone right, which we know it didn't, could be helpful to look at the family members of these individuals and significant others to look for things like this. What are they doing? Even if the petitioner has set his or her own profiles to be more secure, that doesn't stop your friends and family from posting pictures of you or tagging you in their posts or making comments like this that could trigger us to, oh, they love this fishing spot, so let's send a surveillance expert out on a Sunday or something. So watching family members as well could be a beneficial tool.
Now, I'm a little bit of an evidence dork, and I really thought a lot about this on this discussion point I have here. Now, in this case, it was the son-in-law who posted on his Facebook. He didn't tag the petitioner. Now, let's say he did tag the petitioner, and that because of this petitioner's privacy settings, that post from the son-in-law shows up on petitioner's timeline. Now with hearsay, we can argue that things are statements of a party opponent. That's how that can become admissible. If something appears on the petitioner's timeline, even though they're not the author of that content, could that be considered a statement from a party opponent? What if there was never a comment? And I think I hear some people saying no or yes. What if that post stayed up there for months with no correction? Because you can take down somebody else's, if somebody tags you on a post and it appears on your timeline, you can take that down. So what if they left it up there for months and months? What if they pushed like, saying that they liked that comment? What if they commented on the post saying, glad you had fun? At what point does that become a statement by a party opponent? If they're adopting or commenting it, or mentioning that it is a valid statement? I think it's a really interesting question, and that's why it's important to understand how Facebook works and how these things can, you can react to various statements, how you can share them, how you can comment them, because those things have meaning. And when you do that, I think as we move forward, there's got to be a line between when someone actually takes on that statement. I think it's a question to be had, an objection that should definitely be made. So from a petitioner standpoint, what do we do? And I think it's damage control. Many petitioners firms, I bet, have like a welcome letter, and they might have something that says, don't post stuff on social media. I don't find that to be sufficient anymore. You really have to explain to your clients, what do you mean by that? Because what somebody might think is not damaging to their case can be. And so I think this is something that as we move forward, it needs to be mentioned in an initial meeting with your client, maybe more fully explained in a letter. These things have to be addressed. A lot of people are friends with their coworkers or even management. And a lot of people might say, well, I don't want to defriend them, take them out of my network. They'll know, it will be weird at work. You actually don't have to. Privacy settings would allow you to actually just remove access to their wall or to your wall. So you stay friends with them, but when they go to click on your profile, there's really nothing getting posted. And so that's a nice alternative to the social dilemma of staying friends with people, but not really letting them have access anymore. If you're in a situation where your client is getting cross-examined on Facebook posts, again, I think there's some stuff to do on redirect to really help remedy that situation. There are clients out there that are going to post about having to miss a certain event because of their surgery or because they're in pain. They might even be checking in, not just to CrossFit, but maybe also to medical facilities or their physical therapy. And that could be a nice redirect as far as their efforts to get better. The biggest thing that you have to talk about with your clients is the privacy settings. If you just simply Google your petitioner's name, you'd be surprised what you can find. Google is just a powerful resource. Keep in mind, a username, a profile picture, even if your account is set to private, will be public. So you can see just by Googling what kind of websites that they have accounts with. Keeping in mind, even if your profile is private, pictures from other people's Facebook accounts might not be. And I think, Jane, you had a good example about not just researching petitioner, but family members. Do you want to expand on that?
Right. I mean, even if the petitioner's own page is completely private, they've done everything right. Even if a friend or family member is not just tagging them in a photo, because my understanding is that some of the privacy settings you have to approve any tag that you'd be put in. But even if we're looking at that and there's photos of the petitioner, I mean, that could be something that could be helpful, even though the person's doing everything right and has listened to their attorney's advice and made everything very private. So just make them aware that when other people are posting photos of them or saying things about them or including them in posts, that it could be detrimental to their case.
And so the next couple of sites here I have are just showing the various, I have here the links that you can send to your clients to look at their profile settings, making sure it's private. You can, for example, on Facebook, if someone tags you, you can have the option to approve that that's going to show up on your timeline before it automatically does. And those things are really important. You're also allowed to create a list of friends, and then you can edit what those people see. For example, blocking out that timeline so that no posts are being seen from those people. I definitely have a list of, friends that are coworkers or people that I don't want them having access to everything, and I'm able to limit those sets of friends and do the exact same thing for family members. Instagram has similar settings, Facebook does, and then also your Twitter has various settings as well. And to go through that, I think it's very important having your clients look very specifically as to what their privacy settings are. It's not as simple as public versus private. There's more to it, and having them go through that is really important. I think it's also important to remember, as we talked about what happens when you Google your clients. Don't assume that every image that comes up for somebody's Google image search is going to be related to them. While preparing for this presentation, I actually Googled myself and I wanted to see what photos came up. There was a photo of the Golden Gate Bridge because at some point I had a friend on LinkedIn that worked for British Airways and that was the photo for British Airways. That's how somehow that got tagged to me, because Google's going to try to come up with as much relevant information as possible, and if there's not that much about you, it's going to start reaching further and further and further out to try to create something that's even a bit relevant. There's also, I have a cousin who's also Rachel Simmons, so some of those are because of her. If you have a common name, there's going to be so many other things that won't be specifically related to you. And so keep that in mind. You know, I think the example with the father-in-law case is an example of assumptions, and sometimes digging further before you start to present something as being from your petitioner is crucial.
Well, and from a respondent's perspective, that's why I just use these things as a clue or a trigger for surveillance. Because like the father-in-law case, had they said, oh, okay, maybe he likes to go fishing, and would have gotten some surveillance, they easily would have seen that that was the wrong father-in-law, would have saved a lot of embarrassment, a lot of wasted time and effort for the parties and the arbitrator to parade all these witnesses and ultimately look stupid. So a lot of these things I think can be cured by just following through, getting that surveillance footage and putting that into evidence, which is much easier from a foundational standpoint. And I think more powerful because some of these posts can easily be explained as, oh, they were having a good day, they just had an injection, it hadn't worn off in 3 weeks yet, or whatever the case may be, as opposed to consistent surveillance or footage that's going to hold stronger weight with the arbitrator.
So we're going to now turn our attention and look a little bit more at the foundation and some of the evidentiary logistics that you're going to need to use these social media sites. Now going on to the next slide. The question is, why can't you just issue a subpoena? Has anyone here successfully issued a subpoena against any kind of social media site? Because I'd love to talk to you and I would be very shocked. Most of them are only using it for criminal matters, and even then, they are digging their heels into the Stored Communications Act. They're not releasing that kind of information. If you're really interested in trying to figure out what you can do via subpoena, those are the links that will give you more information about what you can try to subpoena. Carpenter versus United States is actually going for oral arguments before the Supreme Court this term. And that case is going to be talking about the transactional records, whether that's going to apply to the third-party doctrine. That case is regarding the Fourth Amendment, but I think those things are important as they kind of trickle down to civil cases and to workers' compensation cases in due time. So moving forward, with foundation, it's not that hard actually. The first thing you really need to establish is the printout of, let's say, the Facebook page. Is that actually an accurate depiction of the Facebook account? You don't have to do it with petitioner. You can do it with a coworker who's friends with the petitioner on Facebook and who's familiar with it at the time that you would obtain that information. Keep in mind, when you see it, print it. Content can be deleted, websites change. You actually had a little discussion earlier as to whether there is a duty to preserve. In civil cases, obviously, I don't think so in workers' compensation because of the lack of discovery. Any opinions on that?
I think there's a couple of ethical decisions out there that have come down on the attorneys that have instructed their clients to remove postings on Facebook, because that was spoliation and cannot advise your client to disregard the law. So there's ethical opinions out there that have come down to the attorney to instruct them not, if you're instructing your client to take things down, That's unethical, and there's ethical decisions out there. And
I think some of those decisions were for civil cases, correct, or specifically?
well, I think it has to do with interfering with litigation. And I don't know what, I don't think there's a line that's more confident in civil cases.
Any other opinions on that issue?
Well, I guess the counter to that, again, is that you can't advise your client to delete something, but you can advise your client to change the privacy settings so it wouldn't otherwise be accessible to the other party. Now, that other party could get it through the normal process of discovery in a civil case, they're probably not going to be able to get it in a workers' compensation case if the client has changed the privacy settings.
Yeah, I agree with Brent. And the other thing that petitioners attorneys can do, I think, is say don't post, as you mentioned earlier. You can tell them, don't post anything else. You just can't say, you got to take down these posts. That's what I think crossed the line in those cases.
Any other opinions, comments? Can you speak up a little bit? Unsanctioned, yeah. Yeah, and I understand your point as to the difference between, violating sanctions, discovery rules versus just the ethical dilemma of it. Again, how does that all trickle down with civil cases down to workers' compensation? I think that's a good question. Any other comments or concerns before we move forward? All right.
One of the things I wanted to mention with that too is the initial social media search report that I mentioned at the outset that I get at the beginning of many of my claims. If there's something relevant, the investigator who authored that report will take snapshots of the social media post, and it'll be contained in the report. So what I can then do is call that individual as a witness to lay the foundation to say that that's a true and accurate post as he or she saw it on X date when they initially looked at this person's social media, so that we don't have to get the tattletale coworker or try to pay a friend $100 to come in and testify against their friend or something. It makes it a lot easier if we can just call the investigator as a witness to testify to the foundation. The other context, and again is more in a civil side, is that there are companies that their specific function is to preserve social media data. It goes into metadata and things that I do not pretend to understand, but when these things get a lot more complex in some of the civil settings, there are companies that you can pay to come in to actually preserve that data. They'd be able to say where the photo was taken, when the photo was taken, when it was posted, where, the IP address it was posted from if the individual is denying that they were the one to post it. So just be aware that there are companies out there that would do it. For our purposes in comp, since the rules of evidence are somewhat relaxed, normally something like a friend or investigator or coworker should be sufficient to be able to get the information into evidence.
And so the second issue, other than establishing that the printout of whatever social media that you're going to be using is, a fair and accurate depiction of the Facebook account, the other thing you need to establish is whether or not this is in fact the Facebook. If you're cross-examining a petitioner and they say, well, that's not my post, I didn't do that, you can still use circumstantial evidence to establish that. Is the profile picture a picture of the petitioner? Some of the specific information in the About section of a Facebook account might have date of birth, family members, hometown, current address, employer even. If those things link up, that's circumstantial evidence that this is, in fact, the petitioner's account. I've had people, issues with whether or not they shared their social media passwords with other individuals. Again, taking a look and seeing, well, what other posts were from other individuals. At the end of the day, it's going to be the arbitrator's decision as to whether adequate foundation has been laid. And I think a lot of those questions can turn into weight versus admissibility. I think before trial, if you just have a feeling, petitioners, you should go through a client's Facebook account and go through them versus posts that maybe they could be cross-examined on and really have an honest conversation about how to respond to that. I see we have a question.
Yeah, kind of petition was being crossed around and just said, this is fake news.
With what are you talking about specifically?
We're going to cross it down. We're trying to cross it down. And this is not fake news, it's not fake. It is. That's not so
circumstantial evidence of what it is. You can absolutely have someone just say, that's not my account, that wasn't me, I never did that. And again, that's kind of going through the profile name. Is the name that they're using, is that similar to a Twitter username that also corresponds to them? At the end of the day, I hear what you're saying. Could this whole thing be completely fabricated? Could someone have just made up a whole Facebook profile, using it to be petitioner? Yeah. The truth is that could be done. Whether someone would go through 5 years of Facebook posts to create something for litigation, possible? Yes.
No, in fact, that calls in question and says it's fake news. That's not it. That's not what follow. That's not what information. How would you go and get into the LA Foundation and say that this?
That's where you would potentially call a coworker who is Facebook friends with the person to say, I've seen them, make these posts before. It's for the arbitrator to physically look at the person and see if it's the same person in the photograph and things like that.
I think that issue, again, is more weight, not the admissibility. If the other circumstantial evidence is locked in, the about section, the photograph, even the content of the post, other photos of the petitioner in that timeline, I think it starts to become the petitioner's testimony. This is coming from the petitioner's story, right? It becomes the petitioner's testimony versus the weight of the other factors and whether or not it's at least going to be admissible and for consideration for whatever it's worth. It wouldn't be for impeachment purposes.
It ends with a discussion you have. Is this your Facebook page? No. Well, you can't bring out outside evidence. Foundation is not it's not a more likely not to be an established foundation for your account. You can't use circumstantial evidence to say, well, this is all, it's more probably not to be. You lay the foundation, you don't.
At the end of the day, it's going to be the arbitrator's determination. There's no right line rule as far as what is sufficient foundation. It's going to be the arbitrator. So I respectfully disagree. Just because a petitioner is going to say, no, that's not my Facebook page, there are other ways to establish that foundation. Sorry.
Well, if somebody says, are you 42 years old, and you say, no, I'm not 42 years old, that's the end of the inquiry. You don't get to bring in somebody else to say, no, he's really 44 years old, or he's 42 years old. And that's just, it ends at that point. You can't use outside evidence to impeach on collateral matters. And whether or not it's a Facebook page, whether or not that's your Facebook page or not, is a collateral matter. Right?
Wait, Kevin, are you saying you can't take the medical records and have date of birth and say?
What I'm saying is you can't use outside evidence to impeach on something that's collateral. So whether or not the guy is, it's his Facebook page or not, that's not relevant to whether or not he got injured in the line of, in the course of his employment. So whether or not it's his Facebook page or not, if he denies it's his Facebook page, how do you then bring in outside evidence to establish that?
I think a coworker could testify that that individual friended them on Facebook and repeatedly makes posts in which they are in the photograph and the profile picture is that petitioner's photograph and things like that. That's what we mean by contextually. If you can get somebody else to say that this person repeatedly posts and then they deny that it's them, then it's for the arbitrator to decide whether they're believing this outside witness or the petitioner who's denying that it's even their account when all the information matches up that it's them.
Which is why we go to the trial about collateral matters, because the trial about saying
I think at that point now you're talking about an issue as to whether, whatever the purpose of it is, whether this is relevant. And so there's definitely a ton of objections that can be made on the basis of relevancy, depending on what is the contents of Facebook, what is the end of the line or the end game as to why this is being used. If it's just credibility versus whether this is something an IME or a treater relied on, those are going to become issues. Go ahead.
I have a huge problem with what's going on here today. And the reason is
Because you're old now.
I didn't hear it. I don't care. The problem is is that there's a pervasiveness of hacking, there's a pervasiveness of people doing things to other people. And I think the rules are so relaxed to allow this in, even for Wade, that there should be a way, and I'm going to ask, this is my main question, as to who put up the post. How can we, as lawyers doing our due diligence, check to see who put up the post?
So I think some questions as to whether if your client is sincerely saying, this was not me,
That's
asking
right.
them who they shared their password with, having, if it's a...
Is there
if it's
any
a
other way
girlfriend-
besides sharing the password?
Looking at the content of it and kind of like corresponding and collaborating, that if sharing the password, yeah, if they actually have been hacked and other accounts have been hacked, having the evidence that they in fact have had privacy issues with the actual email address that they've established their Facebook account with. I use, for example,
How will I do that if I want to do my due diligence? Because I'm an older guy and I don't know how.
Well, if you're talking about your
through the testimony of the petitioner, mostly.
But the arbitrator's not going to believe the petitioner.
No, but you're talking about your client, right? You want to verify that your client didn't post it. It would be easy for your client to contact Facebook and try to find out if it was hacked.
Is that
for
true?
me to do that.
Has anybody ever done that?
Yes.
Okay, well, let's hear about it.
Actually, he has a good point.
So if you're looking into this, use Facebook as an example. Your client in Facebook can request a download of all of their data, which Facebook will email to you in a day or so. That's going to include the IP address from which every single post was made. So you can tie it not to a petitioner, but you can tie it to a computer, a phone, a specific device. That, I think, gets to most of what you're getting at.
And the petitioner themselves can do that through their account. They can download all of their data themselves, which then I question whether we can subpoena the petitioner directly for that information, since we can't subpoena Facebook. But that's another issue for another
Right.
time.
Subpoena Facebook had to do with someone else doing it. Your client can request it from Facebook.
Correct.
You can subpoena Facebook, they would.
The other thing to consider, though, is you might need to have an expert in that case to translate what all these IP addresses are going to mean and how they factor in. Because when you download that kind of information, you're just going to see a bunch of IP addresses. And what that meant and where that came from, you're going to need an expert to relate that. However, though, I think a simple way to put that in an arbitrator's mind, and maybe it's not enough, but if, for example, they're getting notifications from the email that's associated with that account that they are having privacy issues, like that it has been hacked, the password needed to be reset, I think that puts legitimate issues as to whether or not that, with the IP addresses, with the content of the post not matching up because they shared their password, all of that together can put some legitimate concerns as to whether an account has been hacked. Go ahead.
So I've seen one of these reports that respondents or insurance companies do. There's companies, and you could elaborate, you said it already, that do this huge thing about social media and all these other activities alike. So now, let's say something comes up. Then this investigator has to get on the stand to testify and authenticate what they did. Okay? How are you going to do it? Because they just pulled this off the internet. They don't have it. I've seen the reports. There's no veracity to the report. It's just a photocopy with commentary from an investigator.
Right.
So it doesn't seem to me that that would be admissible.
Well, and I think if there's truly an issue about somebody either creating a profile or somebody having stolen your password and, posting things to your account that's not accurate, that's when respondent could go one step further and try to get these vendors or these third-party companies to look into things like IP addresses and metadata and things like that, if the issue is that relevant. I mean, if they're really going to go that far, this is a really important point that they're going to spend the money and time and effort to do so. I think there are ways to authenticate that through the technological side of things.
Agreed. But I guarantee you that a respondent or respondent's attorney or insurance company, despite verification of veracity, will terminate someone's benefits on the outcome. Maybe this is true.
Well, and if the
Not
arbitrator ultimately believes that that your client got hacked, then there could be a penalty situation. But I think if the respondent reasonably relied on the fact that this person's Facebook account, their email address, and all the information on that Facebook account, their location, their friends being coworkers, and all the other contextual data that we talked about point to the fact that this is the petitioner, and we reasonably relied on that to terminate benefits, I don't think it would be a penalty situation.
Okay,
But you can try. Pictures, posts, whatever the case may be.
Another thing to keep in mind as well is how did the investigator acquire the information? If the information on a Facebook page is public, that's one thing. I have seen investigators where they will directly friend request petitioners. Obviously, a contact with a representative party, an issue to bring up as to whether or not those are the what is it called? The fruits of the spoil. I'm sure you're the fruit of the poison. There we go. That's what it is. Also, I think you could, depending on the privacy settings, and that's why it's important to look at that material, whether or not it is a friend request of a friend. So an investigator could request petitioner's friend and possibly have access. Whether or not that's a contact, another question.
And also, we're almost done. And also, as attorneys, don't resist the urge to try and search for a petitioner on Facebook using your own profile. We did find information that if you as an individual are searching someone else, you are more likely to show up in their people you might know section. And then that petitioner might say, hey, I know that name, I've seen that on letters and things like that. And then we could get in trouble for potentially trying to look into their information. So just something to keep in mind. Let the investigators do that.
2 more quick slides, just 2 more notations. Next one, keep in mind, guys, that internet has its own language. Things like these emojis, when you put them together, they actually mean things. Again, translating that into the next one. Keep in mind, there's very different features, especially on videos. I think the important one to keep in mind is boomerang. It lets you take a quick 30-second video and it can make it move very quickly. So a lot of these features can alter the way videos and photographs are appearing, which I think then puts a big question on reliability and how those things are depicted. So know that. Ask, how that was used, whether any of those apps were used to alter videos and photographs. All right.